Welcome to Season 2 of the Off the Record podcast with me, Catrina Rose. I'm so excited to be back, but this time I am not alone. I have a fantastic new co-host.
Hiya, I'm Verity.
Verity and I are super excited to be back for Off the Record podcast. We have got a whole range of fantastic guests, and it feels really fitting to be kind of doing it this year with all the crazy stuff that's been happening, particularly within the music industry. What we'll be doing is we will be chatting to some incredible people throughout Scotland who are working in the music industry. They're going to be bringing us some really cool stories, some advice, some tips. It's going to be great. But if you're new to this podcast, let us tell you a little bit about ourselves. My name's Catrina. I've been working in the arts and culture and broadcasting industry for about 10 years now. Got a massive love for the Scottish music scene. It's super exciting right now. And it feels like we're really doing some bits. So I'm really excited to be part of it. You might know me from some work on the BBC, but also you might know me from the From Under the Duvet podcast and a few cool music blogs. What about you, Verity?
Yeah, so I'm a freelance broadcaster, zine maker, artist. My work mainly explores music, mental health, LGBTQ issues, and sort of how those all link into each other. I co-host a podcast called Weekly Obsessions, which can be streamed on Spotify, but it's moving to Sub-City in early December. And I'm super excited to be chatting to everyone we've got planned to come on this podcast. Very excited for everything that's coming.
We have got some great people coming up, but I don't think we could have kicked off season 2 with a much better guest, to be honest. I was so excited when Verity told me who we were getting, and I was so gutted when I actually couldn't make the chat. But what a chat, what a guest. Verity, who is kicking off season 2?
So kicking off season 2, we've got TAAHLIAH. So TAAHLIAH is a producer, DJ, and performance artist based in Glasgow. She makes experimental hyperpop music as a way of exploring like wider political issues. So she's just amazing. And she recently became the first Black trans woman to be nominated for the Scottish Alternative Music Awards, 2 SAMA Awards. She won Best Newcomer and Best Electronic Act. I've seen her perform a bunch of times and she's just mesmerizing. I love her. And we had such a great chat. She's so interesting. So you guys are in for a treat.
What's coming up in part 1 of the chat?
So part 1, we chat a lot about how she got started in music, working as a creative in lockdown, particularly as a musician, and navigating that, how your creativity is sort of like helped or hindered in that kind of situation, and sort of the future of clubbing post-lockdown. So she's done a lot of DJing with it, like within online raves and how that's gone, but she makes a lot of really good points about what we can expect sort of post-lockdown and people going out and enjoying music in, a post-lockdown world. So yeah.
Post-lockdown world. Can you imagine it?
I can.
I can dream.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, TAAHLIAH. I think, are you doing okay? How's lockdown treating you?
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, kind of just working, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like I answer this question with the same answer, but yeah, literally just work and just taking it day by day. Been relatively busy, which is good.
That's nice. I think that's the key, always keeping yourself busy. But should we just dive right into it? So first off, I was going to ask you, for those who are new to your work, how would you describe your music?
Oh, I would say that fundamentally it's electronic music, but I think it can kind of, depending on what track, it can go from anything from kind of pop to experimental to sort of trance. There's definitely elements of kind of like hyper pop in there as well. I feel like those are like the 4 or 5 main words I would use to describe it.
Yeah, I would agree. Sort of like elements like PC music in there as well, I think.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that PC music has obviously became like a term to kind of describe the music. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but if that's obviously sort of well-known descriptor of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So where did your desire to like pursue a career in music, and how did you get started?
First and foremost, I started DJing. So I moved. So I'm originally from Kilmarnock, in Scotland, but I moved to Glasgow for art school. I moved here in like 2017. And during my second year, I was just sort of like going out with friends and partying and kind of experiencing club culture on a kind of different level to what I maybe experienced before. And a lot of the people that I knew or people that I would run into were DJs and were playing in spaces. And so I was just kind of like, oh, like I could do that. And and then I suppose the music that I started out DJing with was like I don't really think anyone was kind of playing it in Glasgow around that time. And I remember specifically like going out and kind of experiencing clubs and stuff and kind of really wanting certain songs to play and wanting there to be a specific sound and just never really getting it. And so I just thought I might as well just do it myself. And then that led on to me kind of becoming more interested in sort of DJing as a performance, which then led me into doing sound work, which then eventually led me into doing music. And so I'm now a music producer as well.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Yeah, because you said you were at art school at the moment. What is it you study at art school?
Yeah, so I study painting and printmaking at the Glasgow School of Art. I'm graduating this year. I don't paint and I don't printmake. I basically just make sounds and music, and they kind of mark me on that, which is quite nice. And performances. I did start out painting. I was painting since I was about 11 or 12, but then I just kind of fell out of love with it because I feel like I was painting more for the specific audience of other people rather than for myself, which just made me really not want to do it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, so you feel like with music, you've got more sort of autonomy to do your own thing.
Yeah, I feel like with music, it feels a lot more me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also it's just a much more collaborative process, which I really like. And I really love the way that music can sort of make bodies and sort of make different people move. And it doesn't necessarily mean dancing, but like when you hear like a catchy beat, I hate that term, or you essentially you hear something that you like and your body just starts to move with it. I think that's a really powerful thing. Obviously, the same way that you can look at a piece of art and become emotional by it. But with music, I was really really interested in kind of like the club element to it and sort of making people being able to make people move and controlling that. And I think that's where a lot of my interest in it grew, was just from clubs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I've seen you perform before, and a lot of it does feel like a big performance when you do perform, because there's a lot of visuals that sort of tie into your work as well, right?
Yeah.
So would you say that's like an important element of your work, and what would you say are your main inspirations that come into your work?
I think visually, because I was coming from a visual arts background coming into music, I always wanted to make sure that the visual side of it corresponds, and they both kind of merge with each other and both tell a story. I think with all my art, with sort of like in the past with paintings and kind of video work and sculptures and stuff, there's always been a real political element to it, and that continues on throughout the music. But I think with music, sometimes the political side can sometimes get a bit lost, and so with I always have the visuals to kind of accompany it and sort of bring it back to its roots. And also, so obviously, me being who I am, it's I feel as if my body can be used as a visual aid quite well. And yeah, so I'm quite aware of that. But I think that's where the visual sides comes from. And I suppose in terms of inspiration, um, I think visually I'm just very inspired by the people in my life, sort of my friends, yeah, the people that I surround myself with. And musically, inspiration I just kind of comes here and there, sort of from anything. To be quite honest, I always find it quite hard to try and lay down who I'm inspired by or what inspires me, because I feel like I get inspiration from so many things very quickly and it's quite fleeting. Um, so sometimes it's hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So obviously you established yourself as an artist before all this lockdown craziness happened, and like you said, you're quite easily inspired and it comes to you quite easily. But like, how have you adapted to working as a creative in lockdown, and as a musician, obviously? And has that sort of helped or like hindered your creativity?
Um, I actually think lockdown has really did help. I was based in Berlin from sort of the tail end of last year, so around September time up until March this year. And so essentially, when I came back, it was sort of 3 weeks in, and we were in lockdown. And I really the time that I spent in Berlin, I sort of spent it really trying to hone in on my skills with music production. I kind of got I had got Ableton just before I left in August, and so really just like really got in there and just tried to learn as much as I could. And then when I got back, I think that I started to write what is now going to be my EP, which will be released next year. And in that process, it kind of being alone, and sort of being able to correspond with people through sort of like Zoom and online. I just found that process a lot easier. Um, and yeah, some really great things came out of that time. And I would say that half of my EP was kind of the backbone of it was made during lockdown. Um, but I don't know whether that's just because of the time that I was kind of experiencing life, or whether it is because I am quite an introverted person when it comes to working. Uh, Unsure on that fact, but yeah, no, lockdown was creatively. Lockdown was quite good for me. I think obviously with everything else, it's kind of horrendous, but I didn't struggle that much, which is good, and I got a lot of stuff done. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's great news because yeah, I think it's gone either way. Definitely for a lot of artists and musicians, some people have really been like, "Oh, great, just solid time to like make and create without any like interruptions." But I think others, it's not been the case. But that's great that you got basically an EP out of lockdown, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I think it obviously depends what kind of artist you are, but I think if because I'm first and foremost a producer, it's quite easy for me to sort of get everything done essentially, and sort of collaborate with different people that maybe I want to use for vocals and stuff like that, and get the ideas down. But I suppose if you're necessarily just a singer and you don't do any kind of production work or anything like that, I can understand why it would be quite hard. But I mean, like Zoom and stuff like that obviously has been the saving grace.
Yeah, you mentioned Zoom being the saving grace, and I noticed that you've been doing a lot of like DJing a lot of online raves. So how's that experience been?
um Quite interesting, very interesting. I mean, it's gotten to a point now where I really do just miss being in a live setting. I think that there is something quite otherworldly about playing to a crowd, and yeah, like I mentioned before, being able to control sort of the atmosphere, and I think from like a producer side, like sort of like demos that you have and sort of like playing them to crowds and seeing how people react to them, sort of like testing grounds and stuff like that. But I think with the online rave stuff, it has been quite interesting. I do quite like being able to just pre-record a mix and send it to the promoter and like send like some visuals, and then that's it. That's good. It's quite nice. It's quite nice to do that, because I suppose it takes the pressure off kind of messing up live, and also it means that I feel like with my mixes and stuff like that, I'm quite a perfectionist, so it means that I'm able to perfect the sound as much as possible before obviously the deadline. But I think though, yeah, it has been quite interesting. But I think when it's also a bit weird when you're kind of like, I played Club Quarantine a few weeks ago, and that was different because my webcam was on, so I'd pre-recorded the mix, but my webcam was on, so obviously you could see me and sort of like my flatmates like having a dance to it and
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
But that was quite strange because I'd never had my webcam on before, and it's quite interesting to have sort of, obviously when you're playing live and you're on a stage, it's not exactly your bedroom. So it's also quite, I don't want to use the word invasive, but it's quite strange obviously seeing like hundreds of people are like can see like your like wardrobe and like your clothes racks and like the rugs on your carpet and stuff.
Yeah, it's quite like intimate in a weird way, isn't it?
yeah, very intimate.
Yeah, so you sort of mentioned how your roots are kind of in the underground queer dance scene and you really miss like performing in clubs. Like obviously the queer club scene in Glasgow, it seems like it's been thriving for a few years, but I mean, would you agree with that? What's your experience with it?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think over lockdown I became a resident at Shoot Your Shot, which is a queer club night based in Glasgow, but also does different events kind of all over Scotland. And me and my friends have been going to Shoot Your Shot for quite a while, and it's always been a very, very welcoming space. It's probably my number one club night to go to, like one of my favorites. And I would say that also if I wasn't a resident. I'm not sort of endorsing it in any way. It's just a really, really fantastic experience. And yeah, I think it has been steadily getting so much better generally within the scene itself. And there has been sort of like this new wave of performers and DJs and people getting really into it, which is fantastic. But then also it's there is sort of like the highs and then also the lows. Obviously the low kind of being sort of the segregation of space, sort of different spaces closing, like different after party spaces closing, but then also we have like the art school closing, which one of my favorite spaces in Scotland, to be quite honest. Which is obviously like horrible and like sort of like my sort of experience as someone like moving to a new city. Like a lot of it stemmed from the art school, and yeah, very sad. But then also you have sort of different collectives and club nights really, really pushing for things. And so yeah, it's like obviously it's been great, but then it's also been quite sad. It's going to be interesting to see how things sort of manifest and come around post COVID and post lockdown, and sort of how we as DJs and performers and promoters and stuff are gonna be able to utilize the different spaces in Glasgow, which seem to just be dwindling down.
I know, it's going to be so interesting coming back after this time and going to a club again. Like, I just don't know when that will happen, but it's really interesting to see what the future of that will look like. Like, will you have to take a test before you go in, or like, what's the protocol going to be?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think about it a lot. I keep thinking about what it's going to be like that first time kind of stepping into a club space, or what it's going to be like sort of going behind the equipment and starting a set and stuff. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it, but also I'm quite apprehensive of it as well. Yeah.
What you mean? What do you feel apprehensive about like mostly?
Just I suppose just how people are gonna react with each other. Obviously, before COVID, in kind of club spaces, or I suppose the club spaces that I put myself in, everyone was very free. Would like obviously chat amongst each other, go outside, um, sort of really socialize and really get to know one another. Whereas now, like, sort of how is that going to happen? Because like even when I'm like walking down the street, and someone's sort of like walking towards me, I will purposely, if they don't move, I will purposely like move myself well away from them to make sure that I'm kind of like not coming into contact with them in any COVID related way. And so, and like, if I'm doing that just on the street, how is it going to be when it's
A
like
dance floor.
I don't know what, yeah, a dance floor with like like 200 capacity, and like obviously everyone's going to be rearing to go out, and sort of a lot of things will like sell out and stuff like that. So like, yeah, how is that even gonna
I know,
work?
so much to think about.
You're listening to the Off the Record podcast with me, Catrina.
And me, Verity.
And we are currently in the middle of kind of reflecting on what TAAHLIAH was just saying there. Some really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I loved what she was talking about, how going into clubs, not hearing what you want to hear, and being like, nah, I'll just do this myself. I'm going to make the sounds I want to hear, curating your own vibe. I love that.
I think it's interesting as well, because I would say in recent months I've had so many talks with venue owners about gigs, you know, like getting back to gigs. Can't wait to see a band live, that kind of thing. I've not actually thought about the club scene that much. I've not really thought about kind of rave scene, club scenes, and it was just really interesting to kind of be reminded of that and get that perspective, and actually just that real honest truth about being concerned about it, and actually will it be the same vibe, or will it take us a while to kind of get back to the way we once were before COVID?
Yeah, totally. It's like, yeah, the idea of making sure the spaces are okay and accommodating to this new world of clubbing and this new scene of clubbing is really interesting. And like her take on that was really interesting to hear as a DJ and someone who has not only sort of found herself as a musician within the queer club scene, but also as a performer within it. And, you know, figuring out the future of that was really interesting to listen to.
I also kind of love that idea of where she gets her visuals from. I thought that to say you get it from people, the people in her life, was really cool, because when you think of someone's visuals, especially as a DJ or kind of in the club scene, you don't think of it like that. So it was just a really powerful thing to hear.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing seeing it in person, how it really, the whole thing comes together, and how she sort of said like what she's trying to say, or like the political message that she's trying to put forward can kind of get lost in the music because of the music she plays is like super high, like hyper pop, glossy, fun music, and it can the message she's trying to like give out there can kind of get lost, but like having the visuals there and having her there reinforces what she's trying to say. I think that's a really interesting way of making art and like sort of reinforcing what you want to say. I really like enjoyed her point of view on that. I thought it was really cool.
Because you've seen her live, see, after having the kind of that initial chat with her there, I know we've got more to talk about, that initial chat there, does some of it kind of like, do you now kind of look back on it a little bit differently? Do you kind of see the kind of the performance differently after kind of hearing motivations and inspirations behind it?
Yeah, totally. It definitely packages it all together really well. I mean, I think because the kind of artist she is, it's like she's not hiding anything. Everything that she's giving out and she's bringing to the performance is quite clear. And you're like, she's not afraid of addressing any like huge political issues or what she's trying to say with her music. Like, it's all pretty clear. But having her articulate it in such a great way was really interesting to hear. And like her motivations behind it was like really interesting, having seen her live as well. And like, yeah, all of it coming together is really cool to listen to.
Oh, I loved it. And if you're listening at home, don't forget you can get in touch with via our socials. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just search for @OTR Scott. And you can also head over to our website, which is www.otrscott.com. So what can we expect in part 2?
So part 2, we talk about TAAHLIAH's recent Scottish Alternative Music Award win, in which she won 2 awards in the same night. We also talk a lot about her.
We should say that.
I know. Crazy.
Totally crazy.
So we also talk a lot about her working as like a Black trans artist in the music industry today. And that sort of opens up a wider conversation about diversity within the music industry. And we also talk a lot about her plans for the future and upcoming releases. So yeah, it's an exciting chat.
A lot of exciting stuff.
But yeah, I actually really wanted to congratulate you on your Scottish Alternative Music Award, which is amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
You won Best Newcomer and Best Electronic Music Award, and you're the first ever artist to be nominated and win 2 categories in the same year, which is amazing.
I am.
So how does that feel to like achieve something like that at such an early point in your career?
Really strange. Very strange. Obviously I'm completely humbled by it. And it's kind of when I found out about the nominations, when I found out that I'd been nominated, first of all, I was just kind of like, okay, that's like, thank you so much. That's really, really cool. But I still feel quite, this feels still very early for me. And so I was like, oh, right, okay, that's cool. And then I kind of found out the statistics of it, and obviously being the first Black trans person to be nominated, and then also the first person to ever be nominated for 2, I was kind of like, okay. And then obviously I found out I'd won both, and I didn't even expect to win any, because I don't even have like at this point in time when we're recording this, I don't have any officially released music, so I was just kind of like, oh wow. But yeah, an incredible honor, and obviously means that I'm doing something right if stuff like that's happening.
Yeah, obviously. So yeah, you mentioned you are the first Black trans artist to be nominated and win this award. So I wanted to ask you like what your experience is like working in the music industry as obviously a Black trans woman, and how do you think the industry could do more to support artists from minority groups?
I feel like my experience has been interesting. It's definitely, I don't want to say that it's been lengthy, because I mean, I got signed to my label over lockdown, only really started to pursue music professionally and properly kind of about a year ago. And so I feel like I've been welcomed quite well, despite obviously the intersections of identity that I have. But I definitely, when I began DJing, and sort of when I began to sort of like enter in the space, and like the club space in itself, and kind of I suppose the music scene within Glasgow, there was definitely an apprehension with me, and kind of how I portrayed myself and who I was. I remember specifically, I think it was, I'd been DJing for about a year, and I was speaking to someone at a club or whatever, just talking to them about how I DJ'd and stuff, and they asked me what my DJ name was, and I told them, which is obviously TAAHLIAH, and they were like, "Oh, you're TAAHLIAH," and I could just tell by the way that they kind of they entered the conversation that they really did not expect me to be like black or trans or queer, and it was just like a very interesting experience, because it's kind of like, oh, so you think that there's a real baseline image to kind of the sound that I've created, and you did not expect me to look like this. And I was just kind of like, okay, but I think in terms of, I think obviously providing space and opportunity is the main thing, making sure that we are um, opening up our spaces for minorities, and we are making sure that the safeguards in check, and we're sort of, if you are a club owner or a promoter or anything like that, you're really looking at the people who are also working at the club, albeit bar staff, security people, making sure that there's a fundamental level of understanding there. I remember specifically there was some club nights that offer trans taxi funds, which are really, really great, which obviously means that trans people can get to and from the event safely, albeit depending on what taxi service you use, because obviously you can experience harassment by taxi drivers as well, unfortunately. Different things like that, which obviously make it a lot more of a welcoming environment for trans, non-binary, and queer people. But I think a lot of it, like one of the main things is that you're booking trans and non-binary performers, because if I know from my perspective, if I'm so much more interested in an event or a performance or a set or anything like that, if I can somewhat identify with the artist or the artists involved.
So do you find when you've been booked for a night or a bill, do you feel like you don't feel tokenized or anything like this? Do you feel like a lot of clubs nowadays are good at diversifying their lineup, and it's not just like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely know what you mean. I think there's definitely been some instances where I have felt tokenized, and sometimes I am apprehensive of that. But at the end of the day, we're kind of living in I'm kind of a struggling artist, I suppose. So like, if I'm being paid for it, then I'm going to do it. But there's still that thought in my brain of like, oh, are you only booking me because of who I am, or is it or are you actually interested in kind of like the aesthetics of the music, or kind of like the vibe that's going to be created if I play, or anything like that? I think it's something that you can't really escape. I've never felt overwhelmingly tokenized in any way, I don't think, or no instances spring to my mind, which obviously means that my experience has been quite fortunate in my experience.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, I wanted to chat a bit about like sort of your role models as well within the music industry, and obviously representation is so important, and like having diversity reflected, like, you know, the whole thing, like you can't be what you can't see type thing. So who would you say your main role models within the music industry have been?
I wouldn't necessarily say I have role models. There's definitely sort of producers and vocalists and sort of artists that I'm interested in creatively and sonically. I'm quite apprehensive to kind of lay down what interests me, one, because obviously, like I said before, it changes so
Yeah.
much. And two, sometimes I get I think because of the identity that I inhabit, and also the sort of trans electronic producers that are out there, sometimes I'm apprehensive of mentioning them or being compared to them in any way, just because I don't really like being compared to white people. I feel like it sort of brings this hierarchy immediately whenever comparisons are laid down. Doesn't matter sort of what identity you intersect. It always creates this hierarchy of like the less established person is obviously seeking what the more established person has got. I just don't really agree with that. I don't really identify with it in any way. And so a lot of the role models that I look up to are literally just people who I know, people who I've collaborated with, kind of, yeah, just a plethora of really, really beautiful people that create really, really beautiful things. And sometimes, yeah, I'm a lot of it is I don't like placing the aesthetics of my work or anything to do with my work on sort of like the shoulders of someone else, I suppose. And so that's always kind of how I tackle that that question.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you really enjoyed like collaborating and working with people you know. And I actually really enjoyed your remix of the Walt Disco tune, Dancing Shoes.
Oh, thank you.
And I was wondering, like, what do you enjoy most about collaborating with other artists in like your local scene?
I think it's always interesting to kind of gain the perspective, other people's perspective on your work. So like the Walt Disco remix, for example, James, the front person of the band, is a really good friend of mine, and it was lovely to hear what they had to say about my work, and sort of that they were obviously interested in creating a remix for their release. And obviously all the other people that I've collaborated with not a few, but I think around four people for my EP. One of them being Kavari, who is an electronic music producer based in Aberdeen, and she's really, really great. It's just really nice to kind of, and also Sophie Hannah, who kind of, me and her have been working since right at the beginning of lockdown. My first single is with her, and we have a really lovely working relationship in that. I think we definitely get each other's sound quite well, and it's really interesting just to see how other people take your work, and how you take other people's work, and sort of the different things that can come out of that, and obviously other people's aesthetics, music aesthetics, sort of vocal qualities and stuff like that, and how you can make something really, really beautiful when you just mesh the two together. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. Yeah, I always love hearing like remixes of like I love it when Yeji brings out like remixes of people like Charlie XCX remixes. Is like my favorite thing. Just seeing how other artists like interpret other people's work is like really interesting to me. But yeah, we're almost finishing up here towards the end of the interview. I just wanted to know like what you've got planned for the future. What's next for TAAHLIAH?
Well, like I mentioned before, I have my EP will be out next year. And I think that's gonna come out. I don't know specific timelines, but I know I want it to come out sort of before the summertime. So I'm definitely dead set on that. My debut single will be out very, very early next year. It's just kind of getting sort of the final bits added to it, so kind of mixed and mastered and stuff like that. And kind of during lockdown, I started to plan different live shows and productions, and I know that I'm gonna I've created this performance essentially called The Ultimate Angels, which will kind of be a lead up to the EP coming out, which will feature several different trans artists, which is quite a big collaborative effort, which will kind of highlight a lot of sonically what I've been looking at over the past year, I suppose, and main backbone of it will obviously be sort of like the EP and sort of the different sonic elements that I can take out of that and put into a performance, and that's going to be presented in Transmission Gallery in Glasgow.
Oh my gosh,
in March.
that sounds amazing. Oh, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be exciting. So hopefully, COVID kind of aside, that'll work out quite well. Hopefully there'll be the opportunity for there to be a bit of an audience, but it will obviously also be documented and shown kind of in different ways that I can't really say too much about. But it will obviously, it's going to be I'm really putting my heart and soul into it, so I'm hoping that it pays off.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great hearing you chat about all your work and inspirations and future projects. Can't wait for the EP to come out. Keep my ears open for that.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for chatting to me, and yeah, have a great evening.
No problem. You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was such an interesting chat I just had with Taahliah. I think the conversations about diversity within the music industry are so important and they're so necessary, and all the points she made about that were amazing. And the idea of like having these preconceived ideas of who can make a certain type of music was sort of really interesting to hear. Like the idea of someone being like, oh, so you're Taahliah, oh right, you make that kind of music. That was like a very interesting point that she made. And that's thinking about like her inspirations or people that she knows, like people who are in the music industry, like the local scene. So like when she was like beautiful people creating beautiful things, and that's what inspires her. I thought that was like really touching to hear. That sounds a bit cheesy, but it was.
No, so true.
Yeah.
So true.
What did you think?
I think it's so powerful, especially kind of expanding on what you just said there, this idea about who makes what kind of music or who even makes music. Kind of hope someone seeing her wins, not just win, but wins. And hopefully they feel like actually the industry is inclusive and is open to them, and anyone can kind of make the music they want. I mean, look at the success she's had so early on, and it's only, fingers crossed, going to get better from here for her. So I'm just excited to hear what's coming next, and I want to get back in a club now, and I want to have a Taahliah rave. So that's all we want now, Taahliah rave.
For sure. So yeah, big thank you to Taahliah for coming on the podcast. It was really great to hear everything she had to say about being an artist today. But coming up, we've got some amazing guests who are going to be chatting to us about working in the music industry, everyone from photographers to artist managers to radio station managers, everything. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, stick with us. We are super, super excited to come back and do this again. In the meantime, please get in touch and follow and subscribe. You can get in touch with us via our socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just search for @OTR Scott. Don't forget our website, www.otrscott.com. Subscribe, tell your pals, tell your mum, tell anyone. Come and listen to this. If you're interested in young people in music in Scotland today, this is the podcast for you. Thanks from me, Catrina.
And me, Verity.
We'll see you soon. Off the Record is produced with support from Creative Scotland, Youth Music Initiative, PRS Foundation, in association with Youth Music, the Academy of Music and Sound, EmuBands, and the Association of Independent Music.